Hey
right?
guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives tonight. Oh, and sorry, I know I've been on a hiatus for my surgery and then back for like 2 shows and then a hiatus for going to Florida, but now I'm back. Tonight's guest is a candidate for 2020. His name is Joshua Lee Collins. He is running for the 10th district in Washington State. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, Joshua.
Uh, yeah, no problem. It's good to be here.
So, what inspired you to run to begin with?
Well, I guess the biggest reason is I saw the success that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had. And I'm a truck driver, and I was working listening to a town hall with Bernie Sanders, and he was talking about what we need to actually finish the political revolution, and he said basically almost these exact words: if you're thinking about running and you're working class, run, right? And then the next day, Ocasio-Cortez is like the number one like thing going on in the news, and she's saying the same thing. If you're out there and you're working class and you see problems and you actually want to solve them, and you're progressive, give it a shot, and you never know. So
Absolutely. And as we all saw, in 2018, there were literally a few thousand people inspired by Bernie who ran across the country. Some of them very small positions, like, just in their town, and then some as big as lieutenant governor. And many were successful. So it's pretty amazing. You're right. A lot of people who ran had no political experience at all. So you do have well, first I should say, why are you running as a Dem?
So there have been independents running in Washington forever. Leftist independents, progressive independents, and they typically don't do well. Now, one of the biggest reasons I wouldn't run as a Democrat in many states is because you can get shut out in the primary through a rigged, primary voting system and process. But in Washington State, it's a best of two. So really, just putting the D next to my name makes it more likely that people will at least look into my candidacy, and it gives me access to people who are maybe not okay with voting for an independent, but don't necessarily like the candidate that is running. Now, for most of the people who are independents and leftists in Washington, they're going to find out about me, and they're going to know that I'm not not exactly a typical Democrat running as a Democrat. So I'm not too worried about getting branded with the establishment type label. But yeah, I think it's, quite frankly, it's just the best strategy to win. So I think it gives me the most the biggest chance of actually winning and getting past the primary. So.
And at this point, do you know how many people you'll be running against?
No, I don't. It's an open primary, so it's like a free-for-all in the beginning, and the top two advance from any party. I do know that if a Republican runs, they're going to get 30 to 40,000 votes, and I need to be able to compete with that, and get more than that. So I have to come in second place in order to advance. Very similar to what Sarah Smith did in the 9th district in Washington. So.
I was actually going to ask that. We love us some Sarah. I had her a few times on here. She is phenomenal. I'm hoping she runs again as well. Now, she's not your district, right?
No, she's the 9th district and I'm the 10th. So.
Okay, cool. So, and I'm sure you can ask her for advice and stuff as well. She's freaking amazing. So the person who holds the title in that office right now, what first of all, are they a Republican or Democrat? And also, what what are the differences between you and them?
Mhm. Okay, so the biggest difference between him and I are worldview and like perspective. Um, so he is a rich, centrist, quote unquote centrist, Democrat, and I'm a working class leftist, and I believe in policies that focus on workers as a priority rather than afterthought. Um, he Policy wise, which is what I think we should really focus on. He does not support Medicare for all, and he has like explicitly said he will never support Medicare for all. He will never sign on to the Medicare for all bill. He's not going to, and he's a Democrat. He's one of the new Democrats. Which is the right wing part of the Democratic Party, and he he's against Medicare for all. He's not going to sign on to the Green New Deal. He's his stance on the healthcare system in America is to defend and protect the ACA, and he has no real plan to deal with the 45,000 people that die every year because their health insurance is inadequate. And that kind of speaks to his worldview that he is a guy worth somewhere between $7 and $12 million. We don't really know, but he's a multimillionaire, and he's telling us that we don't need healthcare, we don't need to worry about climate change and jobs, etc. So he's right wing, and he's funded. And the biggest problem with him, and the most blatant issue, like glaring issue, is that with all of his policy issues, like the disagreements I would have with him, you cannot trace them all to his donors. So he is funded by his top donors are Boeing, Raytheon, J.P. Morgan Chase. He's the financial industry, the military industrial complex, the insurance industry. They're the ones that put him in office every term.
Well, that says a lot right there. I know that on your platform you are vowing to fight to get lobbyists out of the political spectrum. How do you think that would change progressive policies and even the Democratic Party as a whole?
Well, I think the Democratic Party should go back to focusing on workers rather than bosses, because a lot of the times the people they're meeting with from these corporations, they're not the people who are doing the work and actually producing for our economy and making our country work, right? It's the people who are profiting off of that labor instead. So if we got lobbyists out of the system, and I'm specifically talking about like corporate lobbyists and foreign lobbyists, right? I think it would massively change how much respect they have for the voters in general. If you are primarily being in contact with your actual constituents rather than people who just have a lot of money, then I think that'll make you more responsive to the people.
Yeah, absolutely. So you stated that your opponent will not sign on to Medicare for all. How do you feel about Medicare for all? Is that one of the cornerstones on your platform?
Yeah. That it was one of the biggest issues in the 2016 race as well. The Medicare for All plan is a bold plan to completely end the system where if you don't have enough money, you don't get the level of healthcare that other people would get. I think it's really important that we completely end the system where your income and your wealth determines the quality of healthcare that you get. So, I don't have any caveats when I say this. I am for Medicare for all. I want a single payer system that completely gets rid of the for-profit and private health insurance companies that are leeching off of our system and creating an extra burden of to produce profit for millionaires that are making money off of this system. I think they should be completely cut out of the system, and we should not allow them to continue profiting off of something that actually impacts lives and can make or break your actual life. So.
Now, what about prescription drugs? Bernie has proposed a cut in prescription drug prices, a cap put on them so that people can't be billed above, say what they're billed in Canada or what have you. And people like Cory Booker keep voting it down. So it has not yet passed. He is going to be proposing it again. So that's kind of a separate entity from Medicare for All. How do you feel about prescriptions? Is his bill something you would support?
Yes, I would support something like that. I would go much farther, but of course, if I were in Congress and there was something in the House, I would definitely sign on to that and fight for it as well. I've been paying for my insurance for years now, and the cost of prescriptions when you actually need them can be outrageous. Sometimes it's only $10 without insurance, but sometimes it's a few thousand. And I used to carry an EpiPen. I don't anymore. Probably should. But that the cost of that and the cost of other things that are life saving for people. We should really respect the fact that these. Like, people need these. It's not something that they choose to need. It's something that they actually just genuinely need. And they're like, and we need to have more empathy for that. I would definitely support, making sure no one had to pay anything at the time of service. And with life-saving drugs, I don't think we should be sending a bill to any person who needed to save their life by buying a drug. So. Yeah.
I think that's one of the most difficult things, because when you go get a prescription, there is no getting a bill. You need to pay that on the spot, or you don't get that prescription. So that's why you're seeing a lot of things lately, especially about people dying because they don't have their insulin, and things like that. It's an epidemic for sure. What about things like opioid addiction? Is that prevalent in your district or your state?
I would say it affects us about the same as many other districts in the country. It's much worse in some areas, but it is definitely an issue here. I think we should be providing services and stable and safe housing for people who are going through situations like that. But yeah, I think we need to actually take bold action and actually address the issue head on. And I don't think there's any way to face that issue without talking about funding it and actually putting money into a program that really once and for all addresses the issue.
And what are your thoughts on the actual so-called war on drugs?
Well, I believe in the legalization of most drugs. I think we should legalize and regulate things, and ensure that when people are trying to get if someone is addicted to a drug and they are trying to get it, they're not getting something more dangerous, and they're not going behind into this black market system where you can't actually safely deal with your addiction, as well as having treatment options available. So and the war on drugs has affected countless people, and I think that it's one of the worst things that our country has ever done. It's like the alcohol addiction, except it still hasn't ended. So.
I'm sorry, somebody's comment just distracted me. Do you guys have for-profit prisons in Washington State?
Um, I'm not sure if we have for-profit prisons. I think we do though.
If you do, is that something you support?
No. I think we should end all for-profit prisons. And I think in general we should change the way our you know, correctional system actually works. It's funny that we even call it a correction system because we don't we focus more on the punitive aspect than the actual corrections. If someone comes in, committing crimes, and we're just, throwing them in a cage and, that's it, instead of actually working on rehabilitating people and, ensuring that when they do go back into society that they are, fully capable and, having, set up for success, then I think that's the way we should be working towards, to where, we are actually making sure that people who go into the prison system don't actually continue going back into it. So.
Absolutely, and primarily people of color, unfortunately. Bernie has created legislation to end cash bail. To my knowledge, none of the other presidential candidates have signed on to it. Is that something you would be something you would support?
Yes, I would support the end of cash bail. I don't think how much money you have in your bank account should determine how much time you spend in jail before you're while you're awaiting trial. So.
Let me see. I'm scrolling through the comments. Do you support a federal job guarantee?
Yes, I do. I do think that the federal government should provide jobs when if the private market isn't actually fulfilling the needs of the people, and not only that, but we actually have a need for very radical plans to repair our infrastructure and improve our country. So I think that for multiple reasons we should be doing a federal jobs guarantee. It wouldn't be the first bold plan that we've done in this country, and I think that when we actually do provide people decent paying jobs and use our federal budget on improving our country, I think that speaks for itself as to like improving our country. So.
Now, you state that you would want a $20 minimum wage by 2028. What is your minimum wage in Washington State as of now?
The minimum wage in Washington State is set to be $13.50 by the year 2020, I believe. Now, I think what we need to do is we need to continuously increase the minimum wage, with the largest corporations being required to increase their minimum sooner, and we should increase it until it is above the cost of living and maintain it that way, and that's essentially just a living wage. I'm in Pennsylvania, and so are some of my teammates, and ours is $7.25, which is, yeah. It's pretty incredible. So as far as that goes, if 2020 it's supposed to be 13, how do you think that people will respond to getting it to 20 within the next 8 years? Well, I think one thing to make clear is we are right now focusing on lifting one of the biggest burdens off of employers, and that is healthcare. If we are ending the system where your employer actually pays for your health insurance, and instead we're doing it with with federal spending with the Medicare for All program, that means that if you have employees, you are now saving money, especially for small businesses. And my my ideal situation would be that that savings does not just get pocketed by the owner of those businesses, but actually goes into the hands of their workers. Because otherwise, that would be similar to like a pay cut. If you were getting your healthcare paid for them and now you're not, and then that money is just being pocketed. So I think, at the same time that they are saving money on the cost of their employees, I think that we should be focusing on increasing wages during that time, because if they're saving money, they can put that into the hands of the people who need it the most, which is their workers.
Right on. Somebody is asking about school. Is charter schools something prevalent in your district?
Charter schools. So in my district, we have decent, we do have decent public schools. I think it's important that we actually improve them. We, like much of the country, we've had teachers, go on strike over wages and classroom sizes and conditions in the schools. And I think that's something we should address all over the country. Personally, I don't think charter schools are the best system. I think if we're going to have decent schools, I don't think they should be reserved for only a select number of kids. I think all of our schools should be better. If one school is becoming more technologically advanced than the others, that's a giant advantage. And the kids who didn't have the resources to apply to that charter school then get left behind. I don't think that's a very fair system. I think we should just actually change the system where we are funding schools based on the value of the properties around them, and actually fund them based on an equitable system, and have all schools being decent schools instead of just some, and make it so that if you're sending your kid to public school, they're getting a good education no matter where you are in America. So.
Absolutely. You do state on your page that you support free college or trade school at any age.
Yes. Yeah. So
can you expand on that?
When I talk about free college or trade school, I don't just mean the 19-year-old high school student. I also mean, if there's a 35-year-old nurse who wants to become a doctor, she can become a doctor. If there is someone working as a cashier in their 30s, they can go and become a welder anytime and for free, and they don't, with no cost to them. They can choose to go into a career that they'd like to go into, and that is something that like many of the plans I'm proposing, it's an investment in our people. It means if you want to do better and you want to have a job that is more in demand, especially, then you can, and we will give you the resources, which is an education, to actually go and do that job. So, if you want to become a welder at 30, or if you want to become, a nurse when you're in your 30s. My mom, by the way, actually became a nurse when she was, near 30 years old. And, I think anyone should be able to do that. Just go to school when they need to. And if anyone wants to make a career change to something that they think they would be better suited for, I think we would all benefit if people were actually doing the thing that they belong doing, I guess. So.
That's a really important thing that I haven't seen candidates really stress, that it can be for all ages. I know, like, Bernie has stated it here and there, but I think that's a really good point to actually add that into free college, because someone like me who's going to be 40 next month would love to go back to school. Monetarily, it's sure as hell not feasible. But if it were free, bring it. So something else you have on there is mental health. That kind of flows with the Medicare for all, but you do have a separate section for it. And I always like to give a shout out to candidates who do that, because it kind of deserves its own separate section for it. What were your thoughts behind putting that separately?
Well, mental health care in this country, it's something that is tied to so many issues. You know, it costs us so much as a society to not address. I mean, for example, people don't know, but if you are dealing with stress and you don't know how to deal with it, because you don't have any the resources to actually deal with your mental health, properly, no one to actually, talk you through it. That actually has a long-lasting impact on your health. There are, there are actually statistics to show that you'll live a shorter life. You'll have, you're more likely to, be exposed to things like heart disease, et cetera. And, besides that, I mean, so not only is it a financial thing that, we are going to save money as a society by treating mental health, healthcare in this country. We're also talking about things like, kids that are dealing with problems and, maybe they don't, know what's going on, and they have a serious mental health issue. And instead of being exposed to, years of someone talking them through it, helping them, and really, a trained professional that really wants to help them, they're exposed to an internet full of neo-Nazi propaganda, and we're surprised that we have a bunch of violent white supremacists that are going around doing insane things in this country. And it ties into, a lot of issues. And the same thing when, a mass shooting does happen, after, how many of those people have access to mental health care? They were just traumatized, obviously. My sister was, she worked at Mandalay Bay during the Las Vegas shooting, and she was locked in a closet, and she doesn't have free mental health care. And that's, that's such a traumatizing event for someone to go through, and for them to have to just suck it up and go through their life as if it never happened. I mean, that's obviously something I can't stand for. So.
And honestly, and this isn't like a blame Trump thing, but we've seen since 2016, be it a lot of things, be it the rise of social media, whatever, the amount of people with depression, the amount of suicides, the amount of these things has risen exponentially. So people do need mental health care. So yeah, right on. Good for you for making that point. And God, my heart goes out to your sister. That's just, I can't even fathom. One of my biggest passions is voting and the election process. You discuss how you would implement a ranked choice voting, an automatic voter registration. Can you first touch on ranked choice? Why is that something you think needs to be implemented?
Well, I think ranked choice voting affects, it impacts one of the biggest, problems in our election system, is this lesser of two evils feeling. When you feel like, when people generally feel like if you don't vote for this person, then you're technically voting for the other guy. Instead, I think we should have a system where you pick who you would want, and if that person has no chance in hell of winning, then your vote goes to your second choice. And that means you can actually vote for who you think is the best candidate, and that would make it a more democratic system where we are actually voting for who we want rather than who we think can win.
Absolutely. What do you think is advantageous about automatic registration?
Automatic registration, I think it's just funny that, I don't know, we try to make it so that people have to jump through hoops to vote in this country. I think, if as long as you are who you say you are and you're voting, we have strong repercussions if you're lying. So, and it's very rare that anyone ever, actually lies about who they are. and so I think it's, very obvious we should just have a system where you're automatically registered, you go and vote, and it's that simple. And you know, wash your hands of it and walk away. You just voted. It shouldn't be this process where you have to check your registration a couple days before because maybe it was changed, and now you're not sure if you can vote in the primary. That whole system is it's just archaic, and it's just begging for corruption to get in. And I think we saw in the 2016 election that a lot of people call me a conspiracy theorist about this, but I think it was fully rigged. I think a lot of the primaries and a lot of states, they just wiped people off the voter rolls, including me and my wife. We actually voted in Nevada that year, and it was my first time voting in a presidential primary. And our registrations, me, a leftist who has never voted Republican in my life, and my wife, who's even to the left of me probably, we somehow end up registered as a Republican and have to do same-day registration, which you don't think anything of. But later on, if either of us had been chosen as the precinct delegate, our entire precinct wouldn't have counted, and they would have just thrown it away. And that's you might have seen in Nevada. That's why people were quote unquote like brandishing chairs. It's because they had a system where coincidentally a lot of young people's votes just didn't count. So.
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest clusterfucks. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Las Vegas was just, yeah. I mean, anyone who thinks it's a conspiracy theory that it was rigged needs to read WikiLeaks and read the transcript of our lawsuit, because I mean, oh my God. Yeah. And places like New York have even come out and admitted that they purged over 130,000 people off the rolls and things like that, but still people don't want to acknowledge that. Now Washington State has mail-in only votes, right?
Yes, yeah, okay. I actually really like that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people propose that. Now, when you mail it in, you get a like kind of a number that you could check online to see if it's been received.
Yeah, and it's a really great system. Once you're registered, they will send you the ballot automatically. If you change your address, it can get forwarded, etc. And it's a pretty simple system. So in Washington State, the number one thing is just registering people to vote. And you can actually register online, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that we have to make it easier for people to vote. That's my biggest fear. What do you think is the all-encompassing, overarching issue that you want people to focus on and really look at candidates and see their policy on?
The number one issue that I think we are dealing with right now is the perspective of the working class, or the respect for the working class, I guess. Many candidates, while they for numerous offices, they think that they can address the problems in our society by without addressing the fact that workers are being screwed. They think that they can improve wages without making sure that workers actually get paid more. They think they can improve the lives of working class families without spending on their communities. They think they're trying to do everything except for address the issues directly. They want to do weird like market adjustments rather than actually addressing the fact that working class people in this country, no matter what part of the country you're in, you feel like you're getting screwed because you are, and wages aren't going up. They're not matching demand. In industries, especially like mine as a truck driver, instead of wages going up, they just make us work more hours for the same same pay. So the hourly, despite the high demand for things like truck drivers, nurses, my mom's a nurse, you know, instead of, you know, actually increasing pay to attract more people to the industries, you know, they will instead, you know, normalize, you know, a 50 and 60-hour work week. And that's the same thing that's going on with our entire system. Is they're not, like, nothing is working the way that, you know, neoliberal and like these like old ways of thinking like assume that capitalism work. It's not logical. It's purely working in the favor of the rich and not the working class. And I think it's important to remember, if someone doesn't want to address the fact that workers are getting screwed over, then I don't think that they are, you know, the proper person to be representing working class people in this country.
Absolutely. So you are Bernie 2020?
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
All the smart people are.
Yeah.
So can you just give everyone your like website, your Twitter, all those things?
So my website right now, we have a splash page up, so you can go and sign up, and we'll have our full policy section updated by the end of this week. But it is joshua2020.com, and you can go there, sign up, and it will, you know, it'll ask you if you want to volunteer or you want to donate as well, and you know, you can. It's a pretty cool little experience if you go to that. And my Twitter is Joshua4Congress. So at Joshua for Congress. And you know, my Instagram is Joshua_Lee_Collins, and that's about it. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. You guys, I think I'm going to come back on in about 15-20 minutes to discuss the whole Biden Bernie thing, because I'm just so heated. These past few days I've been kind of like all consumed with it. So I think I'm going to come back on in about 15 minutes to just rant and get some shit out of my system. But in any case, thank you so much, Josh, for coming on. I wish you best of luck. And, you know, thank you for stepping up and running and, you know, being the candidate that you would want to vote for in the progressive movement.
Yeah, thank you. I've been watching your show for a while, and it's pretty cool. You've had some pretty big names on here, like Ro Khanna, and you know, a lot of the Justice Democrats, Sarah Smith, etc. So it's really great what you're doing, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for watching, guys. And like I said, I'll probably be back in about 15 minutes or so. I'm just going to collect my thoughts in the jumble that's in my head. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Josh. Everybody have a good night.
Bye.